Tonight, new details are emerging about a separate, unrelated shooting at the Catawba County Motorcycle Club. The incident took place early Sunday morning in Newton, North Carolina, leaving one man dead and another critically injured. The quiet of the night was shattered by rapid bursts of gunfire, more than 30 rounds ripping through the darkness with deadly precision. Families sleeping in nearby homes awoke to echoes of gunshots, bouncing off their walls, unaware that their neighborhood had become the scene of a targeted killing. By the time the last shell casing hit the pavement, 2 men lay bleeding outside the Outlaws Motorcycle Club's local clubhouse. One would never see another day. The other was fighting for his life, every breath growing weaker. Witnesses reported seeing multiple shooters emerge from the shadows, unleash a barrage of fire, and disappear before sirens filled the air. In their wake, they left bullet holes in homes, cars riddled with damage, and blood pooling on the asphalt. What was once a quiet street had transformed into a war zone. When police arrived, they found yellow crime scene tape stretched between trees and terrified residents peering out from behind curtains. The clubhouse stood dark and silent, offering no answers. This was not a random act of violence. It was a calculated strike against one of America's most dangerous outlaw motorcycle clubs. The Outlaws' motto, "God forgives, outlaws don't," is not a marketing slogan, it's a core belief. Their black and white skull emblem signals allegiance to a brotherhood that has turned motorcycle culture into an organized criminal network. Federal law enforcement recognizes them not as hobbyists, but as an international crime syndicate, with operations spanning weapons trafficking, drug distribution, and violent enforcement tactics. North Carolina offered the Outlaws fertile ground, strategic highways, rural areas perfect for covert operations, and limited law enforcement resources. Over time, they didn't just set up chapters, they embedded themselves into communities dominating local criminal markets. Their drug operations involving methamphetamine, cocaine, and marijuana have been described as more sophisticated than typical street-level dealing, using trucking companies, rallies, and front businesses as cover. The club's power lies in its patience and subtlety. They operate quietly, build relationships, and make communities dependent on them. So by the time their true nature is revealed, they already control the territory. The Newton shooting was not an isolated incident. It was the predictable result of an organization so powerful that it drew enemies bold enough to risk striking back. Violence in this world is both a weapon and a warning. The attack began around 6:15 p.m. on Saturday evening. More than 30 shots were fired outside the clubhouse, killing one man instantly and critically wounding another. The gunfire damaged cars and pierced nearby homes. Residents described the sound as relentless, forcing them to hit the floor or take cover. The Outlaws Clubhouse sits in a quiet, mixed residential and commercial area. Police quickly secured the scene, working overnight to document evidence, mark bullet holes, and collect witness statements. From the beginning, investigators treated it as a targeted attack. The precision, timing, and number of shooters suggested a planned hit. Attention soon turned to one of the Outlaws' most notorious rivals, the Pagans Motorcycle Club. The two have a long, violent history, particularly along the East Coast. Within days, SWAT teams raided a property in Lenoir, suspected of being linked to the Pagans. Authorities have not disclosed what was recovered, but the operation was tied to leads from the Newton case. Investigators are reviewing surveillance footage, tracking phone records, and interviewing anyone who might have relevant information, though the outlaw code of silence makes witnesses scarce. The Newton Police Department is now working alongside state investigators, the ATF and the FBI. Their aim is not just to identify the shooters, but to determine who ordered the attack and why. One thing is certain, this was not a mistake. It was calculated, deliberate, and meant to send a message. Whether about territory, revenge, or something deeper, the shooting has pulled a quiet North Carolina town into the middle of a deadly biker feud, one that could ignite further violence. In past outlaw biker conflicts, one violent act has often led directly to another. Police across North Carolina have increased surveillance of known clubhouses and affiliates, hoping to prevent further bloodshed before it starts. The Newton shooting may have lasted only minutes, but for law enforcement, the work is just beginning. In a case where the motive may be hidden beneath layers of loyalty, pride, and secrecy, the search for justice is likely to grow more complex before it becomes clearer. Criminal context, outlaws, pagans, and violent rivalries. To understand why this shooting happened, it's necessary to examine the long-standing rivalries between outlaw motorcycle clubs. The Outlaws and Pagans are not just social riding groups with different colors. They are powerful organizations with decades of violent history. Both see themselves as dominant forces in the biker world, and when their paths cross, conflict often follows. These rivalries are not random street fights. They are organized, territorial, and deeply personal. The Outlaws Motorcycle Club, recognized by their Charlie Deathhead logo, operates under a strict hierarchy and a code built on silence, respect, and retaliation. Once they establish a chapter in a region, they expect complete control of that territory. Any other club moving in is treated as a direct challenge. The Pagans Motorcycle Club, founded in the late 1950s, has grown into one of the largest outlaw clubs on the East Coast. Known for their Viking-themed patches and aggressive reputation, they rarely back down from a confrontation. Over the years, the Pagans have been linked to shootouts, assaults, and large-scale drug trafficking cases across multiple states. In North Carolina, both groups have active chapters, putting them in direct competition for territory, influence, and underground activities, such as narcotics distribution and weapons trafficking. The boundaries between these groups are not merely symbolic, they are enforced, sometimes violently. Previous incidents have included assaults at biker rallies, fights during traffic stops, and law enforcement raids on clubhouses. Rarely, however, has the violence been as public or as extreme as the Newton shooting. One unwritten rule fuels much of this danger: nothing goes unanswered. If one club suffers a loss, retaliation is expected. That cycle can escalate quickly, pulling in more chapters, more cities, and more casualties. It's this pattern that has drawn federal agencies into the Newton case. Their goal is not only to solve the murder, but to prevent the outbreak of a larger wave of violence. The shooting outside the Outlaws clubhouse left one man dead and another critically wounded. The first victim died at the scene before paramedics could intervene. The second was transported to the hospital in critical condition. His current status has not been made public. Authorities have not yet released their names, but both are believed to have connections to the biker community, possibly as members or close associates of the Newton chapter. For neighbors, the violence was shocking. People who had nothing to do with biker rivalries watched from their windows as paramedics tried to save a life, only steps from their homes. Police have not released an official motive, but the nature of the attack, precise, targeted, and coordinated, makes it unlikely to be random. In outlaw motorcycle culture, control of territory is paramount. That includes who can wear colors, host events, or even ride freely in an area. The Outlaws have held a strong presence in North Carolina for years, but the Pagans have recently been expanding into the same territory. Turf disputes are not the only possible cause. Retaliation is common if a club member has been injured, insulted, or killed in a previous encounter. Even minor incidents, such as wearing colors in the wrong place, can escalate into violence. Another possible motive is criminal competition. Both clubs have been linked to drug distribution and weapons trafficking. A conflict over illegal operations could quickly turn deadly. The investigation is complicated by the culture of silence surrounding these groups. Members rarely speak to police, and insiders prefer to settle disputes internally. Detectives are relying on surveillance footage, phone records, and digital tracking to piece together events leading up to the attack. The shooting took place in a quiet Newton neighborhood where families live and children play. Several homes were struck by stray bullets. While no bystanders were physically harmed, the fear is lasting. The sound of more than 30 rapid gunshots has left many residents shaken. City leaders and police have faced pressure to explain how such a violent event could occur. Patrols have been increased, and surrounding communities are monitoring motorcycle club activity more closely. Federal involvement signals that this is not being treated as an isolated crime, but as part of a larger problem tied to organized crime and gang violence. The Newton shooting was more than a single act of violence. It was a message. One man is dead, another is fighting for his life, and a small town is now part of an ongoing turf war between two of the most notorious motorcycle clubs in America. Police are piecing together physical evidence, surveillance video, and witness statements. But in a world built on loyalty, secrecy, and retaliation, finding the truth will not be easy. The unanswered questions remain. Who ordered the hit? Who carried it out? And will this spark further bloodshed? For Newton, the fear now is not just about what happened, but about what could happen next.